Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT9, and BT9 offers us lots of new and powerful cards to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the DexDorugoramon deck. So the DexDorugoramon deck has two different ways that you could build it. You could either build it in the purple base or you could build it in the black base, and both have their own sets of pros and cons, and I'll be going over both of those versions relatively quickly in this video, so that way you could get a basic understanding on what the deck is trying to do. But to boil both versions of the deck down to its most simplistic form, what the deck is trying to do is just go all the way up into your DexDorugoramon, and then have DexDorugoramon apply lots of pressure onto the opponent, end up getting deleted some way, so that way you could get a free Dexmon out of it. And both are utilizing the card in its different aspects. So the black aspect is playing a little bit more into your traditional evolution, where you're trying to build up your stacks, playing more in line with the X Antibody type of mechanic, where you're digivolving on top of the same level, where in the purple version, you're just trying to do your classic purple thing, fill up your trash as quickly as you possibly can, and then utilize your trash to digivolve from with certain card effects, and at worst, you still have the traditional way of digivolving all the way up into your cards, making it a really fun and flexible deck in both of those different versions with their own sets of tech and tools. So going over the black base really quickly first, starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dorimon. So Dorimon is just the main Digitama and acting as a good card draw engine, because we're going to be adding cards in our inheritable sources, and this is going to be rewarding us with some card draw for doing that type of an action. Then I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dorumon, because Dorumon is going to be one of the deck's digging tools, looking for our Kota and our other X Antibody Digimon off the top 3 when we hard play him, and he has an inheritable ability similar to our Dorimon, where he's just going to be adding a memory instead of drawing us a card when we're increasing our inheritable abilities. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Ryudamon. So Ryudamon is just another searching and digging tool for the deck to adopt. This time it's looking for our Yujis, which we're not really playing, in contrast to our Kotas, and his inheritable ability actually is pretty decent at trying to have an alternative way on deleting our DexDorugoramon, where it just is giving our main stack the Decoy Black ability to be able to protect our substack if we're going to be making one. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dorumon. So this is the brand new BT9 version of Dorumon, and this is just allowing us to cycle through our deck by discarding a card with X Anti-body in its traits to be able to draw 2. So it's just helping us fill up our trash while looking for cards. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dorugamon. So Dorugamon we're using just because if we want to use DexDorugamon, then we kind of have to run the base in order to make use of his ability in terms of what the Dex version of the card is doing. But Dorugamon is still a really good card just because his inheritable ability is just DP boosting our higher levels, on top of the fact that natively he's going to be acting as a good defensive tool to stop some of the opponent's early game aggression by gaining the blocker ability, as long as we have a card in its inheritable source that's an X Antibody or another Digimon with X Antibody on our field. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ginryumon. So Ginryumon is just another inheritable to make sure that our higher level Digimon have the blocker ability, so that way we could try to sit and wall out on the opponent with a good DexDorugoramon, and when that DexDorugamon does block and gets deleted, then out will come a Dexmon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DexDorugamon. So DexDorugamon is one of the better cards in the deck for us to use, because it has the alternative Digivolution cost where it can Digivolve for 0 on top of a Dorugamon. So that's kind of the whole idea on why we want to run Dorugamon, and this card through that transaction will gain us a memory as long as we discard a card with Dex in its name or X Antibody in its traits, which is always good, making us even more tempo efficient. Then on top of that, he also has a nice when digivolving ability, where if we used him off of our Dorugamon or in the purple side from our trash, then we get to have this Digimon gain the blocker and retaliation ability to again be even more defensive with. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DoruGreymon. So DoruGreymon is to help with the overall damage output on top of make use of our DexDoruGreymon. So DoruGreymon will just add some extra protection where when we Digivolve up into him, we get to place a black card with X Antibody and traits from our hand on the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source to prevent this Digimon from having its DP be reduced and him be deleted by card effects, which is super important at trying to maintain a healthy field and maintain our cards, so that way we could try to apply a pressure onto the opponent. Then the whole reason on why we want to try to apply the pressure is because he has the nice inheritable ability for our higher stages to take advantage of giving our Digimon security attack plus, and the more of DoruGreymon we have underneath, the stronger our Digimon will be at trying to damage the opponent. And then I'm going to be running 4 copies of DexDoruGreymon to complement what the DoruGreymon is already doing. So we could Digivolve him for 1 on top of a DoruGrey, and then we'll gain a memory as long as we discard a Dex or X Antibody from our hand, which is basically most of the cards in our deck. So that just makes his evolution free, which is always nice to be able to cycle through our deck with. Then on top of that, he's going to be adding some extra removal from a DoruGrey or from our trash for the purple side of things by being able to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Dorugoramon. So Dorugoramon is just one of the cards to, well, A, be really powerful and aggressive with, and B, act as some good control and a solid base for our DexDorugoramon. So he natively will just make himself stronger for each of his X Antibodies and his inheritable sources, which is always good, especially if we want to punch the opponent relatively hard. Then on top of that, he also has a nice one attacking ability to add inheritable sources underneath and be able to delete up to 2 Digimon whose playcost is equal to or less than the number of Digivolution cards under this card, which we could fill up faster and have a larger stack by the time we actually use this card than he normally would be, to increase the range of what we're trying to be able to delete. But the whole goal and intention is to try to use that card to go up into a DexDorugoramon, just because 5 is a little bit on the more expensive side in terms of Digivolving up into him, but he has the alternative Digivolution condition where he could Digivolve for 2 on top of a Dorugoramon. So that's kind of the whole intended use, is we're trying to use Dorugoramon to be able to go up into a DexDorugoramon. Then the ability that we're gaining for using this card is we get to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level, acting as, again, even more solid control. Then, on top of that, his on-delete ability is what we're really trying to take advantage of to be able to play Dexmon for free to gain all of the benefits off of Dexmon, where we get to play a level 3 purple or black Digimon from our trash without paying its play cost, and if we have 5 or more cards with Dex in its name in our trash, which is what we're trying to set up through all of our discarding, then we get to play 1 Dexmon from our trash instead for free, which is really good because we're replacing a level 6 body with a level 7 body. And I'm going to be running 2 copies of Dexmon or Death Xmon as a result, just because, well, this is the card we're trying to play for free off of our DexDorugoramon. But we actually do have other ways to be able to use this card. We could either Digivolve him or just hard play him ourselves, just because he reduces his play cost up for each of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers that are in play, so he could eventually make himself free as long as the opponent has a wide board, which isn't necessarily the most ideal, but if they're just sitting on a whole bunch of Tamers, then we could take advantage of that. And when we do, we get to Digivolve all of the opponent's Digimon and delete all of their level 4 Digimon, acting as a good board wipe, on top of the fact that he has recursive removal at the end of the opponent's turn to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost. So it's just a really annoying card that the opponent is going to have to figure out how to get rid of. Otherwise, it's going to really limit the amount of cards that they want to be using. They're just going to be dying for free off of our Dexmon. Then, as far as the option suite, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Black Memory Boost just for the extra consistency and the tempo plays that we're going to be gaining off of its delay ability. And for the big hard removal card of the deck, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Metal Impulse. So Metal Impulse is just a card to help us fill our trash, Digivolve the opponent's Digimon, and possibly delete their Digimon all in one card. Next, I'm going to be running X Antibody, so the black side of things do actually want to use X Antibody just because we're trying to Digivolve on top of Digimon of the same level, and this card really wants to take advantage of that on top of Cool Boy, and this is also a really good security threat to try to anti-tempo the opponent when we use it, but it's mostly in the deck for its inheritable ability to A, protect our stack against source removal type of abilities somewhat, and B, the when attacking ability to Digivolve during the combat stage is also really nice, especially Digivolving into our higher stages with this card. As far as the tamers go, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Kota as one of the digging tools for the deck, just because he's a memory setter. That's also going to be helping us look at the top 4 for X Antibody traded cards. And similarly to that, I'm also going to be running 3 copies of Cool Boy, just for some more digging and the ability to utilize him on top of our Digimon that are Digivolving in the same level, just makes him really efficient at gaining us some extra value. And then as far as the purple side of things go, for the most part, it is just going to be doing some very similar things, except that we're just trying to fill up our trash and Digivolve from the trash instead of Digivolve on top of Digimon of the same level. So as far as Digitamas go, I'm going to be running 1 copy of DemiMeramon for that on delete, draw, and discard to help us cycle through our deck. And similarly to that, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Sunamon as the main Digitama, just because off of our dex-based cards, when we're Digivolving up, especially from our trash, then we're going to be discarding cards to help gain some memory, and Sunamon will help us with drawing some cards when we do those types of action. Then I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gabumon for more draw and discard based synergy, just because I think in combination with everything that the deck is trying to do, that drawing and discarding is the most efficient way at trying to put the specific parts and pieces that we need in our trash to be able to use them more effectively. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tapirmon, so Tapirmon is in here mostly because we're already playing Maki, but partially because he's also a really good card to help with the deck's overall consistency. For when he dies, he'll at least help us draw some cards. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Drakmon, so Drakmon is another card to just help with our overall consistency, because he's going to be acting as the purple side's digging tool, where we get a look at the top 3, add 1 undead or dark animal into our hand, and add 1 undead or dark animal into the trash, and then the rest go to the bottom. So he's just trying to help set us up while look for our parts and pieces, on top of his inheritable ability, helping us to actually Digivolve into our undead and dark animal on attack. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon, again for some more draw and discard, so that way we could cycle through our deck as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can, and this is a little bit better for how the deck wants to play, because we're not actually trying to delete our Digimon, and we're just trying to swing and trigger some of our various other abilities with. And speaking of one of the inheritable abilities we want to use is going to be 4 copies of Sanglopemon. So Sanglopemon, like Dorugamon, is trying to help us Digivolve from the trash when we attack. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Dorugamon. So Dorugamon is a dark animal. Even though we're not playing Alice and you could play Alice, we're just using him just as a really good early game chipping tool like Tapirmon to help us set up, just because when he gets deleted, we get a mill 3 and then return a purple Digimon or Tamer from our trash back into our hand, so he also helps us with some of our recycling. And then, just like the black side of things, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DexDorugamon, because, well, we could still get his abilities off just from Digivolving from the trash, which is what the purple side of the deck is trying to do. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Metatramon. So Metatramon is just another undead for us to use to synergize with the deck, just because his when attacking ability will help us DP boost by discarding undead and dark animals, which is what we want, so that way we could put him on our trash to then Digivolve into. And his secondary ability also helps us reduce the Digivolution cost when we're going to be Digivolving from our trash. And another card we want to try to Digivolve into from our trash to be able to get its ability off, similarly to DexDorugamon, is going to be 4 copies of DexDoruGreymon. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Grandrachmon as a really good level 6 to help round out what the deck is trying to do. So this is going to be the supporting mega because we obviously want to try to go into DexDorugoramon as often and as quickly as we possibly can to apply lots of pressure. But Grandrachmon is also pretty good because when we go up into him, he gets to revive a purple level 3 Digimon for free, which is pretty nice. And then on top of that, at the end of the attack, so when we're swinging with him, most of the time we'll want to swing Digivolve our level 5 into him, so that way we could get his when Digivolving ability and then trigger the end of the attack, assuming he survives that combat, where he then gets to allow us to Digivolve one of our Digimon into an undead or dark animal in its traits from our trash. So mostly this is going to be targeting the level 3, so that way we could start building our substack right away. And then similarly to the black deck, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DexDorugoramon just because, well, purple has a little bit easier time on filling up its trash to be able to use its ability, and it has a little bit easier time if you run the specific cards to be able to self-delete DexDorugoramon to trigger its ability for that free Dexmon. Then I'm still going to be running 2 copies of Dexmon just because, well, it is the big card and end piece that we're trying to end on, and why we're running DexDorugoramon to begin with is just to try to get a free Dexmon and replace itself, making for a very sticky body and applying extra pressure onto the opponent. Then the option suite is going to be, for the most part, fairly similar. I'm going to be running 2 copies of Dexlution, so this is what's allowing us to also have alternative ways of digivolving from our trash. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Purple Memory Boost because extra consistency and tempo is always nice. But this is kind of a flex spot of the deck, and if you wanted to run options that help you delete your Digimon for extra value, then by all means do so. And then I'm still going to be running 2 copies of Metal Impulse just because it is the big hard removal card. Digivolve is really good in this format just because a lot of people are going to be trying to build their big stack and to try to have that be as effective as they possibly can, and Digivolve hurts that while filling up our trash while also potentially deleting the opponent's Digimon. Then the spice tech of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Maki. So Maki is actually pretty good at reducing the cost of our Digivolutions into our 2-color Digimon, which is going to be all of our deck stuff, on top of the fact that on play, she's looking for 2-color Digimon, and she's also looking for Tapirmon, which are 2 things that we already are running in the deck anyway. And then as far as the memory setter goes, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Matt, just because he is Purple's best generic memory setter that also lets us use our options in Digimon from our trash and add them back into our hand. And then there's still just a whole bunch of other things that you could do in the deck to really customize it and make it your own. So if you wanted to, and you don't feel like running in the black base, the whole X Antibody baseline, then you could run some just generically decent cards. So in the purple version, you could use Sukaimon, and the black version, you could use Junkmon for extra inheritable on-delete abilities to trigger when your DexDorugoramon is trying to be deleted. Then on the black side of things, you have Tapirmon as a good DP booster for your 2-color Digimon, which is all of your Dex cards. And then Ginryumon is just one of the best generic black rookies that we could use for his passive of giving our large Digimon piercing and his inheritable of giving our large Digimon security attack plus. Then in both purple and black, we have a whole bunch of anti-meta rookies. So we have Gazimon and Chumon to stop gaining memory. Then we have Kokuumon and we have Psychmon to also try to limit some of the opponent's other actions. Then the purple side of things, we do have Salamon to act as a good digger for our 2-color Digimon, including purple in its color, which again our Dexmons do. And then we also both have, for purple and black, hybrids that we could run to try to end the game with when we get to that state. On top of the fact that the black side also has some really good other X antibodies that we could use, like Ryudamon, mostly to try to give reboot to pair up with blocker and various other abilities. But on the purple side, if you don't feel like running Grandrachmon, another dark animal you could try to digivolve into is Gulfmon to try to limit and control the opponent's hand. Then we do have just a wide variety of different removal options for both black and purple that we could run in case you don't feel like running the one that I'm already running. And we do have some other really good tech and utility options to think about as well, like Congo and Breath of the Gods for the black side of things. Then when it comes to purple cards, we do have some cards to help us self-delete our Digimon, so we could use Calling from the Darkness as one of the better ones, so that way we could try to recycle certain cards and refill our hand, so that way we could try to discard them later or use them alternatively. And a good card to use for both versions of the deck just to try to help with its overall efficiency is going to be win rate 60%, just because we want to try to discard cards, and the reward for discarding a card is making our Digivolution a little bit cheaper. Then, as I mentioned before, for the black side of things, you could run Yuji as a really good tamer to help us with our memory and draw and help fill up our inheritable sources. Or in the purple side of things, you could run Alice, just again to try to help making going from our level 5 to our level 6 a little bit cheaper while trying to self-delete our Digimon to trigger our on-delete effects. Then a good tamer to run in both versions of the deck is Analog Youth, just to try to help with the overall consistency on adding a card into our hand and help fill up our trash at the same time, as well as utilizing his secondary ability for when our DexDorugoramon gets deleted. But for the most part, I think this is a really solid core or shell for both the purple and the black side of things to start get those creative gears turning when it comes to building a DexDorugoramon deck or just utilizing these types of cards in general. So I think that even though DexDorugoramon isn't going to be hyper tier 1 meta competitive, he's still going to be a really fun and strong deck to be playing around with in either version. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.